Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph.
Hello and welcome to Trial Talk with experienced attorney Michael Joseph. With over 20 years of experience in personal injury, commercial litigation, and criminal defense, Michael is committed to social and economic justice. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're going to talk about accidents at construction sites in New York. Michael, great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so can I sue for a construction accident if I am undocumented? I'm going to hit you with a big one right off the bat.
All right, that's a good question. You know, a lot of people, the construction industry in New York has a lot of undocumented workers.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people come here, they work hard to make money, but, you know, they don't have their papers in line. So when they get hurt, they're scared, they're nervous. They say, oh my God, can I, they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to bring themselves to anyone's attention, but at the same time, they're injured, they need help. So what happens? Well, first of all, if you're injured on the job in New York, you're entitled to workers' compensation. It does not matter if you're legally here, illegally here, if you have papers, you don't have papers. And New York courts especially have taken the position that our safety laws, our regulations, our labor laws are paramount to the nation's immigration laws. So we don't care in New York if you're undocumented, if you're legal, if you're illegal. Why? Because we want to make sure that construction sites and construction projects provide safe tools, provide safe work practices, so that everybody, including undocumented workers, has the protection they need to be able to work in construction safely and go home at night without getting injured.
Okay.
We don't want contractors and landowners cutting corners and exploiting immigrant labor. So under New York law, they are held to the same standards to protect an undocumented worker as they are a union carpenter or a union electrician. They put you on a site. It's their responsibility to provide the protection regardless of your immigration status.
Right. So just a blanket, hey, if you're on this construction site, the person in charge of the construction site is the one who has to provide the workers' comp.
And the way this works in New York is the employer, whoever hires you, whoever hires the undocumented immigrant has to provide workers' compensation.
Got it.
However, New York's labor laws allow anybody injured on a construction site because of certain unsafe equipment or unsafe work practices to sue the general contractor or the landowner, assuming it's not a 1 to 2 family home that's used as a primary residence. So if you're on basically any kind of commercial job site and you're working, for example, for a sub, the general contractor has overall responsibility to provide safe tools, safe mechanisms, and a safe work site. Obviously, if you get comp, you can't sue your employer. That's New York law, but you can always sue the building owner, who also has what New York calls a non-delegable duty to provide a reasonably safe work site, which includes, safe ladders, safe scaffolds, guarded saws. All excavations have to be properly braced. Demolition has to be done in a safe way so walls don't come crashing down on people. You can't have uncovered holes or gaps. People are required to have fall protection. That responsibility is, under New York law, lies with the construction site owner, the project owner, and the general contractor, who's in overall charge of the site.
Okay. And can you explain what New York's ladder law is?
New York's ladder law, which is Labor Law 240, requires that general contractors and building owners provide safe ladders or safe tools, safe scaffolds, and basically safe equipment to anybody working at a height. So what the law really requires is protection from the effects of gravity. So when does Labor Law 240 or the ladder law come into play? Well, you can have an unsafe ladder because the ladder is, not well equipped, for example. If the braces break, if the ladder isn't sufficient to support the worker and his tools or whatever else he's doing, it's not safe under New York law. A ladder could be dangerous or not fit under the ladder law because it's too short. If you have a 6-foot ladder and you have to stand on a top step to reach where you're working, that's not safe. That's a violation. If you have a painter's ladder, for example, and it's not properly placed, if it's not secure, like if it slides or you don't have another person there holding it for you, that's also a violation of the ladder law. So New York's ladder law, which actually applies to other things other than ladders, it's just kind of a nickname that it's kind of gotten over the years, really requires protection from gravity. It requires safe ladders. It also requires, safe means to be able to work at an elevation, basically. And it also provides protection from overhead hazards, things being dropped or anything being fallen onto you.
Okay. And can someone sue if they get hurt because of a defective ladder?
Absolutely. If you're on a construction site and you get hurt because a ladder broke or a ladder wasn't adequate or it slid and it wasn't properly secured, then certainly you have a right to sue the general contractor and the landowner who were responsible for providing that ladder. Now, a lot of people think, gee, can I sue the landowner? Can I sue if my own boss gave me the ladder? Yes, even if your boss gave you the ladder and you get workers' compensation benefits from your boss, you can't sue your boss. So even if your boss gave you the bad ladder, it was still the general contractor's responsibility to make sure you had a good ladder. And if they didn't do that, they're still responsible.
Okay, I gotcha. And what if are there situations where it's the if I'm the one who fell, but I didn't put the ladder up properly, or I did something like it was my fault that the ladder slipped? Does that change things?
Under New York's labor law, comparative fault is not a barrier to a lawsuit. And there's not even an offset. Why? Because it's a state statute. It specifies a statutory standard of care. So even if you were partially at fault or you could have done things a little bit better, if the ladder wasn't safe in the first place, what you did generally didn't cause the ladder to fail. Now, if you were the only reason the ladder failed because you did something stupid, then the law may not apply. The term generally is for the ladder law not to apply, or you have to be the sole proximate cause of the accident. So, for example, if even if you didn't set the ladder up perfectly, if the ladder's braces were already worn and they break, well, then fine. They're still at fault. Why they gave you a ladder didn't have good braces. Right. If you set up the ladder, but then you're up 7 feet and the ladder slides, well, obviously someone wasn't holding the ladder for you. That's also a violation of ladder law. Or if the ladder slid because the floor was slippery or there's oil on the floor, that's still a violation. Why? Because the ladder has to be securely placed and they have to give you a proper place to place the ladder where it's not going to move.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I was just picturing myself in my garage. Sometimes I don't feel like pulling the car out, so I put my ladder in some weird spots to get to the attic. And I'm like, well, that would be my fault if I fell. There's no problem with this ladder. That would be all Kevin right there. Can you sue pretty much in any of these situations, whether it slips, whether it breaks, whether it's too short, whether there was an inadequate scaffold? I mean, are there any sort of nuances there, or is it kind of a blanket you can sue in any of those situations?
There's a general obligation to provide safe and adequate tools to protect the worker from gravity. And if the worker isn't provided with safe and adequate tools that protect him from gravity, and he or she falls as a result, you can sue the person who failed to provide the proper protection, right? So even if you set up 4 different buckets and climb up to an area to work, if they didn't give you a ladder in the first place and you had to kind of jerry rig something to do your job, well, they didn't give you the proper tools, so they're responsible. So in general, whenever you fall on a job site because the proper tools were not provided for you to do your job, that risk belongs with the general contractor.
You mentioned things falling too. Like, so if something falls and hits you, it falls under the same, does that fall under the ladder law as well?
Correct. That also falls under Labor Law 240. So it covers a number of scenarios where things being lifted or hoisted fall, where materials are dropped, because generally on job sites, you're supposed to have things like chutes, buckets, so you don't have guys throwing debris from the 4th floor to the 1st floor. You need a chute so that it eliminates that hazard. There's a lot of specifications on construction sites to eliminate hazards that there's no reason to have that kind of unsafe practice. So, for example, if you have 3 guys carrying a 500-pound load upstairs, well, why didn't you have a hoist? If one of the guys drops his end and the load comes down and kills the guy or injures the guy at the bottom, and you could have had a hoist doing this to avoid that, that's a violation of labor law. If people are working up on the 5th floor and you're on the bottom, and all of a sudden a tool or some material falls and hits you in the head, well, they should have had nets there to protect you from that. Okay, yeah. So basically, the whole ladder law is about setting up a safe work zone in pretty much every way. Well, it's about Labor Law 240 specifically is about protecting workers from every foreseeable hazard caused by gravity, whether it's falling workers or falling objects that hit and injure workers. That risk should be eliminated. That's a risk that can be engineered around, that you have procedures and equipment to protect. Anybody who has to work over open areas should have fall protection. You should have a lifeline. You shouldn't be on a beam, for example, 20 feet in the air unless you have a lifeline.
Yeah, gone are the days where the famous picture of people eating lunch on giant skyscraper beams, right?
Well, you still have that, but now they just have vests and lifelines. They're supposed to anyway.
They're supposed to, yeah.
So those are generally the falling hazards, the Labor Law 240 or LATO covers those type of hazards which would deal with or result from gravity. There's Labor Law 241, which is kind of a catch-all, which incorporates the industrial code, which incorporates all the specifications therein that deal with all the other types of construction hazards. Like, for example, tripping hazards on construction sites. If you're carrying, a 200-pound load of materials, you can't be looking down necessarily to see if there's grease or nails protruding or something in your path. You're supposed to have a clear pathway so you can focus on carrying this load and not step on something or not slip on ice, for example. These pathways are supposed to be clear, and that's one of the regs under Labor Law 241. If you're hoisting a load with a crane or a material hoist or even a bulldozer, the load isn't supposed to swing and hit you. That's why you have taglines, and that's a requirement. So the industrial code has literally hundreds of different regulations for all different scenarios or different hazards that arise during construction to prevent accidents that are foreseeable.
Okay. Foreseeable, kind of a key word there.
Correct.
Yeah.
The construction industry in New York has been around for hundreds of years. We know what can happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's probably not much they haven't seen.
There's plenty of OSHA data on the types of accidents that happen. Falling accidents are probably number one on the list. Getting hit by materials is probably number two. There's a lot of experience in terms of what can happen on construction sites, and the specifications are there to eliminate those risks. And when the specifications aren't followed, you have a lawsuit.
So if I get hurt on a city, county, or public authority, is there anything I have to do to protect myself?
Definitely. When there's for example, if you're working at the New York City Transit Authority site, if you're working at the airport, which is the Port Authority, those are all public municipalities. If you're working on a county job site, they all have a requirement that within 90 days of the accident, you file a notice of claim. So you want to make sure that if you're injured, you don't just wait and kind of heal up at home. If you're on a public job site, the clock is ticking. If you don't file a notice of claim within 90 days, you may not be able to sue. Or if you have to then try to go to court and get special permission to file a late notice of claim, and you have to make a whole showing that obviously they had notice of the accident, that there was a proper investigation, and that the municipality is not prejudiced. But you know what? Filing a notice of claim is filling out a simple form that we do here, and there's no reason not to do it if you're on a public job site. Preserve your right to sue. Protect yourself at all times, because you don't always know how serious your injury may be. You fall one day, you have some back pain. You don't know if it's going to get worse as weeks go by, or you may end up needing surgery. And if you didn't file that notice of claim early on, you're out of luck. And not only do you have to file a notice of claim within 90 days to be able to sue the landowner on a construction job site, you only have a year and 90 days to file the lawsuit, unlike New York's general 3-year statute of limitations.
Okay. Yeah. Back pain's a really good example because, we've all been there where you tweak your back and then 3 days later you're in horrible pain. Yeah.
And there's a lot of pressure on these construction sites to walk it off or just keep working or not report the accident. So, if you're injured, you always have to protect yourself, because the more you don't protect yourself, or the more you don't make a report or document it, you're going to lose. You're going to lose out.
Yeah.
It's setting you up for failure.
What do I do if I was in a construction accident and my boss doesn't have workers' compensation insurance?
That's a problem which we're seeing more and more frequently, especially with jobs. Yeah, especially with day laborers. They get picked up at a job site. Small contractors doing a job. They don't always have their books in order. Well, what happens is there's a couple different things. One, New York does have an unemployed insurance fund where you can go to for those kind of workers' comp benefits. Second, you can the reason you generally can't sue your boss in New York is because you get workers' comp. However, where they don't have workers' comp, you can then sue your boss. Now, these guys don't have workers' comp. They almost always have some sort of general liability insurance, which will pick it up. So you can sue for all the same labor laws or even negligence that you could have sued for before. And now you can sue your boss directly. And when they don't have workers' comp, New York actually adds in the additional benefit that they can't say that anything you did caused the accident. There's no comparative fault or contributory fault defense where the boss himself didn't provide workers' compensation.
Okay. If someone gets hurt on a construction site, how important is it to contact an attorney like yourself?
I think it's incredibly important, because you need to start documenting what happened. You need to get the applications in, certainly for workers' comp. And in the case of a public job site, you need to get that notice of claim done within 90 days. So you definitely want to, if you're injured on a job site, you want to try and get photographs of whatever injured you. A number of cases, if we get calls right away, we can sometimes have workers reach out to other coworkers to get pictures of what happened and document the evidence of how they got hurt. Because, construction companies are pros at covering up accidents, denying what happened, despite the regulations. They're supposed to report these injuries to OSHA. Doesn't happen. In construction accidents are massively underreported in New York, and they really do take every chance they can to try to avoid responsibility. So you really need somebody on your side. The second an accident happened, the construction companies and their insurance companies are working against you. So if you get injured in New York, you need an experienced New York City construction accident lawyer on your side from the get-go.
You mentioned that a lot of times people are, or they're like pushed towards walking it off or not saying anything or just sort of going about their day and all that. Is that kind of why they're so underreported? Is it just because they fear for their jobs or fear for getting more gigs or how is that why?
Well, certainly construction workers want to keep their jobs, especially if they're undocumented. Therefore, they're getting fired because their opportunities are a little bit less. They're not as employable, so to speak, as maybe a union carpenter. Also, the insurance companies, the construction companies definitely push people not to report accidents because they don't want any more claims on their insurance. And they're looking out for themselves. They're not looking out for the guy who got hurt. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, good point. Well, thank you for joining us on Trial Talk with experienced attorney Michael Joseph. To connect with Michael, you can check out NewYorkTrialLawyers.org. And please like and subscribe our channel and leave us a review in the comments. Michael, as always, great to hear from you, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.